Welcome back to That Rugby podcast, joined by myself and Hughesy.
G'day.
From the sports booth. We are back doing another podcast every week, rolling them out now, back in person.
Yep.
Loving it. Hughesy, how are you? How's your week been? I guess you're not under Eddie Rule yet, but
Approaching
Eddie Rule.
E-Day is approaching.
E-Day is approaching. Are you excited?
Well, he's already very much taken over spiritually, if not contractually yet. You know, it feels like a bit of attitude is back in Australian rugby, which is great, and we'll get onto that. But it feels a bit like there's a figurehead, there's a masthead again, and that sort of necessary persona of Australian rugby has been missing for a bit. So that'll weave into a couple of things that we're going to talk about today, or my opinion on the things that we're going to talk about today. But it feels good. It feels good that Rugby Australia's got some teeth again. It feels like it's got someone. Like the NRL found its teeth again in Peter V'landys,
yep.
And who's Eddie Jones be clashing with this week? Peter V'landys. It's two Bulldogs going at it.
Bulldogs with
great.
a couple of sharp teeth going at it.
Yeah,
right,
well, I mean, that's what they look like as well. So you know, so it's great stuff to have rugby in the headlines and have rugby in the media.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to be too, I guess, dismissive of Rennie, but instantly we've had, about 3 or 4 podcasts that Eddie Jones has found himself on, you know, talking up why he's taking the job, Australian rugby, what he sees in it, what he can do, calling out shots at Peter V'landys, something you wouldn't get from a Dave Rennie, who's a very, controlled individual. Business means business, whereas Eddie Jones, business means anything possible to get Australia in the headlines.
Anything's on the and to get Australian rugby to headlines, to get Australian rugby winning again.
Yes.
You know, which is great. And I've seen a few things. I want to address this here as well. Like, there's a few articles that have gone out, rightly or wrongly, saying that the fact that Dave Rennie was a Kiwi is the reason why he lost the job. Now, that's not the reason why he lost the job. I'm sure it probably factored into it a little bit. That's for sure. But the what definitely factored into it was the winning percentage, which is the worst in Australian rugby history. So,
if he was at 70%, he wouldn't have lost his job.
I think even if he was above 50%, if he had a winning record, you have there. Now, granted, he's had so much to contend with, but above 50% is where you've got to be, and a lot of tough losses. And look, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the coach with those kinds of things. Like, you know, for me, when we lost to Wales, when we lost to Italy, I was a bit like, you know, sort of is what it is, but it's emblematic of the Rennie era. And it feels like, look, it was all building up to this World Cup, right? And if he could achieve a result at this World Cup, all past sins would be forgiven. And unfortunately, he never got that chance. And it was just, and evidently Rugby Australia had just sinned enough to be like, okay, we're cutting it here. We're going to go with Eddie. And it's like, okay, fair enough. You know, I would have liked to see what Rennie could do with the World Cup. It's not going to happen though. And he wasn't achieving well. You felt like he was building towards the World Cup, but patience runs out, and that's where it ran out. So, you know, is what it is kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think anyone who writes that it was because of his New Zealand heritage is slightly stupid, because you've got to look at the factor of events that were there. I think anyone who I saw an article today, I can't even remember who. Well, I think it was Israel Dag said, you know, it was disgusting that he got the way they treated him. I'm like, man, look at the world today. Microsoft laying off people, you know, who'd worked for the company for 16 and a half years. Yeah. You've got just companies galore laying off people, and you're going to sit there and say it's disgusting because potentially not even just this isn't just a layoff. They've got a better coach in there. And so I'm like, you know, I know Dave Rennie's a person. We all people, and I get the sympathy that can be there, but don't act like this is something out of the, like, you know, like it couldn't happen to anyone. Like if you're good enough, it wouldn't happen to you.
Exactly.
Again, we come back to that winning percentage.
It's not behaviour that exists purely in and around Dave Rennie. Like, this wasn't some new thing that suddenly came out of nowhere that's never been seen before in the rugby world or in coaching ranks. Happens all the time to coaches in all sports, all codes, all across the world. Sport is a business at the end of the day, and the business is winning. Yep. And he wasn't achieving his results, and you could see it there. I don't think it's disgusting. I would have liked to see him play at the World Cup, but equally, they needed to get Eddie Jones while he was available. That's what you got to do. It's one of those things. I don't think, Rennie. I think Rennie encapsulated perfectly, and it's who he is when he said he's disappointed he didn't get to do the World Cup. I think that's the best way to express it. It's not disgust or anger or anything. It's disappointment, right? And I'm sure he would probably be disappointed as well in the results that he achieved. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's not anything more than that. It's not anything less than that. It is what it is, guys. Sometimes you just have to accept that.
I mean, 99% of professions in the world, you get someone who's completing their job at a 73% success rate versus a 38% success rate. You're probably taking the 73%. Let me do a blind coach test, and you select one of the coaches. 100 out of 100 are selecting Eddie Jones. If we put up their resumes for the time Eddie Jones was in England and Dave Rennie, enough of that though.
I do actually have an interesting hypothesis for you.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Say, for example, I'm just going to think of some... Okay, say David Rennie was coaching the All Blacks, right? Yeah. At a similar percentage to...
Ian Foster.
To Ian Foster, or to what he did for the Wallabies, right? So, low winning percentage, right?
He's gone.
Okay, and say Eddie Jones is available for the All Blacks, right? He said, I want to come coach the All Blacks, really stick it to the Wallabies or whatever.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I know, Siri, it's hard to comprehend. But say Eddie Jones says, I want to come coach the All Blacks. For whatever reason, all your other coaches aren't available, all your other potential hires. But say Eddie Jones is there waiting in the wings, ready to go, right? Would you sack Dave Rennie, a Kiwi, in favour of Eddie Jones, an Aussie?
No. I would rather lose with a Kiwi at the helm than win with an Australian at the helm.
And I think that's another reason why they went with Eddie Jones as well.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm not denying that him being a New Zealander
but you putting it that way, I would rather lose with a New Zealander at the helm than win with an Australian. Now, if this was years and years of going at around about 50% win rate, you could twist my arm. Yeah. But I think that's the fact that we've had such great success that I wouldn't expect anyone bar a New Zealander to be in that role.
And I think that plays into the thing as well. And that's why I said, yes, there is definitely some element to it. I think Dave Rennie had a shorter leash because he was in New Zealand. But even then, he really stretched that leash with he didn't produce results. If Rennie had been producing the results, as I said, if he's above 50% and better than Cheika's win rate, say, and then he gets sacked in favour of Eddie Jones, even though Eddie Jones got a higher win percentage, I would be questioning it more because he's had success. But we're not getting that success, and that's why I said the standard for Eddie Jones is the same as the standard for what we expected from Dave Rennie. And then even if he only achieves what Dave Rennie would have achieved, I would still rather follow that same standard with an Aussie than with a Kiwi. It's better there is something about having someone from your own country coach your team.
And now you say that hypothetical, if Eddie Jones was somehow coaching the All Blacks, let's say, he would be on the shortest leash possible. Yeah. Like, you fuck up, then you're not here long. Like, exactly. I would have no worry. I would, say he was getting Ian Foster's results, I would have been, get him out of there. Yeah. I would have said, get him out of there. I would have been probably leader of the get Eddie Jones out of the All Blacks coaching role band, totally.
Settle down, Israel. There you go.
Yeah. But what I kind of want to get onto, especially with is Eddie Jones back in the seat now, like pretty much, I know we're still 3 or 4 days out from him actually taking it on, but he's fired shots at the NRL. Yes. He's targeted them and then got a little bit of ammo out of them. He managed to get a nibble from them. Yeah. And then he's chomped right back at Peter V'landys.
I really like it because, and it's brought up discussion and it's probably putting some ideas into some players' minds about, there's some good points to be made about playing union over league, right? Greater international opportunities is the obvious one. That's the thing that's always talked about with union over league. Yeah. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck made the switch so he could be an All Black, right? We saw Vunivalu for Australia recently as well, but we've also seen other converts.
Koroibete, one of your best players.
Koroibete, exactly. But even we go back further to Eddie Jones's first run.
Sailor, Takiri, Rogers, Campbell. Campbell played, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe you're right.
Brumbies.
So there's that. That's the very obvious one. But then there's also what you've talked about a bit, Luke, which is that at the moment there's uncertainty in the NRL. There's dispute between the players and the NRL. And it's really interesting to see the media machine owned by the private television networks go to work, calling the players greedy and basically trying to get the public to turn against the players, to get the players to cave, to get the NRL to go, so they get the media revenue money. It's very, very obvious. Sky Sports / Fox Sports, we see you, right? Whereas the players, what I find really amazing is that it's the star players speaking up about it, about issues that don't affect them, right? It's about the lower grade players. It's about the women's pay grade and things like that as well. And they're being characterized as greedy when they're not trying to get bigger paychecks from the people that speak out are not trying to get bigger paychecks for themselves. They're trying to support their mates and their sister teams and things like that, which I think is a really good cause. And I think that it should be, the NRL should be looking at that better. But this is an NRL podcast. This is a rugby podcast. And from a rugby perspective, this turmoil is great, right? These players, they don't know when they're going to play any more international matches in a league setting, right? Because that's totally up in the air with the bargain agreement as well. The NRL season itself is potentially in jeopardy. The players are refusing to do any promotional material at the moment, which is why you might have noticed a lack of advertising around the NRL kicking off again. And there's all of this stuff in there. And then out from the shadows comes Papa Eddie Jones, kindly old Eddie Jones, tray full of cookies. Oh, come here, my sweet. Do you want to don a gold jersey? You want to play for the Wallabies? Maybe win a World Cup? You know? Oh, hi there, Kalen Ponga. It seems like you're having some contract disputes with the Newcastle Knights at the moment. Why don't you come over here? Oh, hi there, Joseph Sawali. You used to play rugby. You were quite good, I remember. You know, it's Mal didn't pick you for the Kangaroos, or you played for Samoa. You didn't quite make it there. How'd you like to play for the Wallabies? Play for a really talented international team. You know, all those kinds of things. And there's little voice in the back of the players' minds like, you know what? The NRL is like 26 rounds plus finals plus Origin and things like that. Super Rugby's a fair bit less than that, right? And there's greater breaks when I've got international stuff on. It's not 30-something weeks all in a row going straight from the NRL into a World Cup, things like that.
Travel the world.
Yeah, go to France. France is pretty nice, huh? Bigger paychecks as well from Rugby Australia, potentially. You know, no salary cap issues there.
Yep.
Right? If you're a 19, 20-year-old Joseph Sawali looking to set yourself up for the future.
Will Penasini as well, become a superstar.
Exactly, right? You know, Parramatta doesn't like you that much, Will Penasini. Why would you keep playing there, right? All the talent's gone. Championship window's closed there. Championship window's just opening for the Wallabies. Win a World Cup, which is the biggest rugby event in the world.
Yep.
Of both league and union, right? It's the biggest and best competition. There's nothing in league that comes close to it. Like Origin is big, yes, but it's only within Australia. Yep. Rugby League World Cup, it's getting bigger, still nowhere near the Rugby World Cup, right? I think it's probably the second biggest international competition after the Soccer World Cup, right? Like what other sport has
Olympics, but yeah, if it's not second, it's definitely third. I can tell you that.
So and as well, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on in a different segment we have planned, but being a successful Wallaby makes you a household name across the country, not just in New South Wales and Queensland. Like it's across the whole country because everyone, when it's Rugby World Cup time, even if you're an AFL fan, you tune in to watch the Rugby World Cup. Like I'm not a soccer/football fan, but I watch the World Cup because that's where you get behind your country and want to support them, right? And you do not get that with the NRL. No. You do not get that with the NRL.
Yeah, I imagine Eddie Jones is sitting there and going to those players and pitching, hey, you know that Accor Stadium that you fill out for your state of origin? Imagine that filled with yellow jerseys against an All Blacks in a Bledisloe Cup game. We'll do that. And you know what? Well, 2 years later, we'll fill it for a home World Cup final.
Yeah.
Absolutely packed. Maybe even the MCG, but I think it'll be at Accor, I imagine. We'll fill that with yellow jerseys.
Yeah. You'll
be wearing that gold jersey, and you'll be scoring a try in the corner to win us a Rugby World Cup.
Yep.
How does that look? How does that feel? How does it just imagine it, picture it, and now say it with me. Final try, winning the game, Rugby World Cup winner.
Yep.
And he's just whispering that into all those players' ears. Yeah. I said it in, if you haven't watched, jump onto our YouTube. I did it's a great opportunity to look into rugby union kind of versus rugby league in Australia at the moment as an All Blacks kind of neutral fan. And I just think it's an opportunity for Australian rugby to rise. And someone actually, commented on that video, and I thought it was one of the better pieces of comments I've written and read, and it stated, the way he saw it, and he's just opinion based alone, Australian rugby or rugby in Australia has potential to grow.
Yeah.
What potential of growth does league have? Like, yeah, okay, obviously you have kids, you're probably going to bring them up with league, but it's not, you're expanding to, but you're not going any bigger in Australia. Like, the Australian squad isn't getting any bigger, and the global game isn't getting any bigger. So Australian rugby, for the lack of trophies, the lack of ability over the past 10 years, you could say the last 10 years has been rock bottom for Australian rugby.
Yeah.
If we start even just being slightly more competitive, then where does it stop? Like, if you say win another World Cup, then you win 2 World Cups, and then all of a sudden, you and the All Blacks are battling every single year, and it's like these games are meaningful. All of a sudden, you're getting 100,000 into them. He was like, there's an opportunity for growth like we probably haven't seen before, which I thought was a good take on it. What I do want answered is, Eddie Jones has come in. Who will be your captain? Obviously, Hoops, the one and only, has had his mental demons to battle. Slip's done a good job. Alan Aliatoa is signed on to 2027. Yep. Does Eddie Jones go, look, let's give Hoops one last crack at this World Cup? Actually, Slips will carry us through to this World Cup, or does he go, actually, Alan's got us as a leader for the next 5 years?
I think he puts it in Hooper's hands. I think he's going to have a sit down conversation with Hooper and says, even when you're not the captain of this team, the players look at you as the captain, right? You are the leader by your actions as well as your words. But I'm not going to put that pressure on you of being the formal captain unless you want it. And so I think he will ask Hooper if he wants to be captain, but there's no expectation for him to be captain. He said, look, it's entirely up to you. Tell me what you want. I want what's best for you as a player. And I think you would be a great captain for Australia. You've served that role well. But if it is too much pressure for you, in addition to continuing to play and keeping your body right, we won't put that pressure on you. And then I think if Hooper says he's done as captain, his time's passed, I think it's Slipper then.
Slipper?
Yeah.
Over Aliatoa?
I think so. I think Slipper's got probably the just from what I've seen, like the on the field, like they're both great players on the field, but I feel like Slipper's got a little bit more leadership edge on the field.
I get what you're saying. I just think you do go Aliatoa and you go, look, this is our captain through to 2027. Give him an experience at this World Cup where we're not expected to win it. Yeah. Whereas it comes back to home soil, it is. He's slightly younger than Slipper. I think he's 28 compared to Slipper's 33 or 32. And I think what naming him captain gets is a bit more interest with those poly boys, and especially the ones we named. And again, it's not, I don't think they'll be like, oh, Slipper's captain, I'm not going to, but it is a respect thing. And if you've got a guy like Aliatoa leading you,
I think, it's a good point.
It's just an
it wouldn't surprise me either.
Eddie Jones is obviously, I imagine, having all of these conversations. Yeah. And the big thing is, you're probably at the most experienced group with those three, where Slipper's led the Brumbies, Aliatoa's led the Brumbies, so you're not worrying. Like, both of those obviously know how to be leaders. Yeah, like you said, even if Hooper's not the lead, Hooper is the Steve Smith when Steve Smith wasn't allowed to captain the Test team. Everyone still goes, oh, what does Steve Smith say about this review? They're not asking if Pat Cummins is really checking it, but it is like that. Like, if Hooper says no, it's still, he's going to be a leader, even with just his actions. So, exactly. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see who he names, and if he goes in a different direction, has something completely different lined up, a Rob Valentini like type thing, who he knows is always going to be there, leads by front football. We don't know, to be honest, but I'm sure we will find out in due course. I'm interested, when is the first international game? I will have to look into that, because I would love to know who he does select and when he has to select it. On to some not so good rugby news. The Waratahs, Kurtley Beale, Australian rugby, shining a pretty average light, below average light on the sport. Just as we were kind of getting into good news headlines and stuff.
Yeah. I don't want to talk too much about the
Allegations,
the allegations and everything like that. But what it does do is it puts into the spotlight a player we chatted about, mainly you really bringing him up, but Maxi Organson.
Yeah.
It's really potentially an opportunity for him to grab that
15 jersey.
That 15 jersey, depending on what happens with Kurtley and his availability. So
I guess, what we'll say with Kurtley Beale, obviously, if you haven't heard, he has has he been charged yet?
I believe he has been charged.
Been charged for sexual assault. We won't go too deep into that.
He has been charged because he was granted bail.
Okay, so being charged with sexual assaults in a pub/club in Bondi. I guess he's been stood down for now. It's disappointing. It's a much more, as we've said, rugby league headline than a rugby union one, but it's happened. Obviously, it goes into the courts now. Everything goes through everything, and you let everything take care of itself. We don't know if he's guilty or not yet, but you'll just wait and see. But like Husey said, to put a good light on this, it does give players opportunities. I like the way Australian rugby and the Waratahs react, stand them down, just get it. Kurtley Beale, just settle this, and then go from there. It's disappointing, and the fact that it's come out like this, especially because I think he is such a proud Aborigine, and just definitely a role model to some of those younger Aborigine players. So it is a little bit disappointing from that. But again, we don't know if he's guilty or not guilty yet. We will find all that out in due course. The New Zealand Sevens just took place, where the Golden Girls and Golden Boys weren't so golden. And that leads on to the Sydney Sevens, which I shall be attending, which will be a good time. But yes, Sevens is a much more hotly contested. I just want a massive asterisk next to the men's win last year now, because I think it was a fraud. Obviously, New Zealand weren't there for half the year. I'm not happy about it. I actually probably want it just cut and just put COVID year. And I think you guys should lose all your trophies, to be honest.
Yeah, that's your opinion.
I
I really don't need to say anything about it because we've got the hardware. So yeah.
Should have an asterisk on the hardware.
I mean, do you want to put an asterisk next to the Bledisloe game 1 last year as well with asterisk dickhead ref?
Well, no, because that wasn't a COVID situation, my friend. That wasn't taken out of your hands. It wasn't a prime minister saying they couldn't travel. I don't know.
It sounds like the French referee had COVID with a fever dream, imagining a running clock or something. Yeah, you're a typical Aussie. Just accept you lost. It didn't really matter because we put 40 on you next week in the Garden of Eden.
Getting off topic.
It's because we were violated the week before by a terrible call from a French referee. The head was
what I'm hearing is the Wallabies don't have enough mental strength to overcome a couple of dubious calls, and that will...
It's because their Kiwi coach didn't prepare him well enough. It was a sabotage job,
Yeah, inside job.
He was telling...
man, Dave.
He was telling, hey, Foley, Bernard, you got plenty of time to kick.
Plenty of time to kick, the waterman on. Hold it.
Just ordering you some fish and chips, Bernard.
Dave
just chill out, bro.
The inside man.
That's exactly what he sounds like as well, yeah.
All right,
yeah. That high forehead with no hair conceals secrets, my friend.
Mastermind.
Megamind,
Okay, back on topic. Gosh, Jesus Christ. Champions Cup. I don't know if you probably haven't watched much of this, but I fucking love the Champions Cup now. It is by far the best club competition in the world, and we need to do something with Japan. I don't know if you saw my Super Rugby video again on YouTube. I kind of pitched a couple of ideas where it was a Super Rugby global competition that could be played similar to the Euro Champions Cup, which is the Europe version of it, but the URC showing off their dominance, all 8 teams qualifying, and the South African teams looking very good. Tackle height in England.
Yes.
Let's get on to this topic because it was an interesting call. Amateur rugby in England said that you must now tackle below the waistline. Now, this has been met with quite a lot of anger from the English. I know there was a petition with over 10,000 signatures signed.
I think it's more than that now.
Now, it probably was.
I think it was, last I saw was like 65,000.
Yeah. The idea behind this is to stop concussions from head knocks. What a lot of people are arguing, and I get the point, is the fact that as a tackler now you're going lower. If you put your head in the wrong position, you will also get concussed, and we haven't taken that into consideration. Look, I'm always for player safety.
Yeah.
Especially at the amateur level. They've got to find a way to make it so players can, more players want to play the game. It's safer for players to play the game. I'm really interested to see how this goes. I hope they stick to it just so I can see how it goes. But I can see why there's anger.
Yeah, and as well, there's some interesting points to be made as well. Like, if you can only tackle below the waist, I think you still have a serious risk of someone putting their head in the wrong place and getting concussed that way. Like, how many times have we seen professional grade players go low and get knocked out? So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how much the risk is actually mitigated. I'd love to see some statistics on how they count the decision. Like, if they notice that, okay, when players go below the waist, they are X% less likely to have the tackle result in a concussion. So, yeah, you see the sense behind it, and yes, we are very pro player safety. But look, if you have it at the amateur level, how are people supposed to learn proper tackle technique when they go up to a higher level, right?
Yeah, interesting topic. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
The whole development aspect of playing. So then, because presumably if you have it in the amateurs, well, if you think about it like this, if you have it in the amateurs, right, but you don't have it in kids leagues, and I know that's been debated as having it in kids leagues as well.
So it's not in kids leagues?
I don't know if it is or not. I can't remember, but I'm going to play out both scenarios for you anyway. Yeah. So say it's not in the kids league, but it is in the amateurs, right? How many people are going to join the amateurs, and how many penalties and injuries are there going to be because people are not going low? It takes them so long to unlearn what they've been learning in the juniors. Right. Say it is in the juniors, and it very well might be. I feel like I've read that it is.
I would imagine it is.
Yeah. How are you supposed to learn proper tackling technique for when you do go into the seniors, right? Like, surely then that's just dangerous when you're in the seniors because you don't have proper tackling technique above the waist.
Yeah, it's more as soon as you go above the waist, like you haven't experienced that before, so you find yourself in a new position rather than tackling technique, because you'd have a pretty damn good tackling technique if you could only tackle by the waist, but it's at that moment you do. And I don't even know, it'll revolutionise, I guess, rugby a bit, because when I go to tackle people, 90% of the time, if I'm not going low, I'm going for the ball. And so now you're just not allowed to go to wrap up the ball.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to make a dominant tackle. I'm interested, like, okay, first person comes and makes that tackle low. The ball obviously is going to be held up. If it's not a dominant tackle, he's going to look for an offload. No one else can come in and touch him, basically. All they can do is come in and go low again. So you're just going to have, like, defenders trying to intercept ball. It's going to be an interesting dynamic, which is why I'm all right with England testing this.
It's not us testing it. Someone's testing it.
A, not us testing it, and B, I don't know. I'm assuming they've tested this before and are now taking it to this grander scale rather than just going full blast. I haven't read enough into it, to be fair, because it's not happening here. But yeah, it is. Well, I mean, yeah, it is very interesting. Like, I am a bit bemused by how it's all going to work.
I'm sure Rugby Australia and New Zealand Rugby will be watching it very closely.
Definitely, 100%. So yeah, we'll keep you up to date with that. Last point for the day, I just thought this would be quite a little good idea, and we've obviously got a couple of similar lists here. I want to know the Mt Rushmore of rugby. So if you think Mt Rushmore, obviously for American presidents, are they all presidents or are they just for famous Americans?
It's a good point. Until you said that, I was very confident they're all. I know they are.
Pretty sure
they are all
presidents.
No, because I was about to say, like, is Ben Franklin up there, but no, it is all presidents. Yeah. It's Washington, Lincoln,
Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt, and I believe Madison, Jefferson. So George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln.
So yeah, all four of them, and obviously. And the way they fall best presidents, but everyone has these conversations now. Who would go on the Mount Rushmore of your basketball, American football? So I thought, if we're looking at rugby and we did it this
Tom
way.
Brady, Jerry Rice, Reggie White, and Barry Sanders. No, Deion Sanders. Sorry,
Deion Sanders. That's actually a pretty good list. I would struggle to argue against those.
Best quarterback, best defender, best wide receiver, and Deion Sanders' best all-round athlete.
Just around that. Yeah. All right. Well, we don't have to do an NFL one anytime soon. But our Mount Rushmore of Rugby, we've actually agreed on quite a few points. I'm going to take you through my list first. Yeah. My Mount Rushmore of Rugby goes like this. Jonah Lomu, I think, revolutionised the game in his way and version of it, and started that movement from, he came about when it was just going into professional rugby. Yeah. And it was just,
And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to interject whenever I agree with one of your ones. And Jonah Lomu is on my Mount Rushmore for the same reasons. It's just he is the first superstar of rugby, you could argue. Like he built up rugby into sort of he put us on the path of what rugby is today and what it can be. And so it was sort of not even where rugby is today, where rugby used to be 20 years ago and where we're trying to get back to. Like, it put us on the path to those heights.
Yeah, global superstar, definitely. Yeah. Number 2, I had Richie McCaw. It's pretty self-explanatory. 2, captaining World Cup winner. And just an all-round legend. Best number 7 to ever do it, a lot would say. And you couldn't not have a list of them.
Yeah, and for that reason, even as an Aussie and having 2 New Zealanders on the list, it's hard to do. But you can't argue against Sir Richie. He's just he's an incredible all-round player. And he's the Cameron Smith of rugby in that he knew how to captain a team, he knew how to play the refs, knew how to work things to his advantage, right? He was a crusader as well, so he had that winning in the Super Rugby as well. So he was a great player for New Zealand. He's an asset that I think you are missing.
Yes, 100%. Third on my list is Brian O'Driscoll, BOD, the Irish centre, I would say is best centre in the game to ever do it. Longevity, just ability. It was just something different. Like for the team he had around him as an Irishman. Yeah. Just what he did and what he accomplished and you wish you could just only imagine what he'd be doing right now with this Irish team. I couldn't go past putting him in there. I
also had Brian O'Driscoll in there. He was one of my favourite players to play in Rugby 08. I definitely had a few Ireland World Cup campaigns because of him. So, yeah, incredible player.
Now, the last one is where we disagree.
Yes.
I decided pretty early on I needed a South African in there.
You don't really.
I looked all around and I said, Englishman Johnny Wilkinson could have easily found it on. I said you could have gone Dan Carter, Taina Umanga, and a third New Zealander. But I was like, you need to look at a South African. I looked at like Percy Montgomery. I looked at Matt Damon. What's his name? Francis Pienaar. 1995 World Cup winner.
I got you.
John Smith. Os Durant was really close, but in the end I decided, and I think he's actually going to get overtaken by Eben Etzebeth in the end, especially if South Africa win another World Cup. But I went for Victor Matfield, the lock. I just think during that, and again, we're showing our age a little bit. I haven't got Colin Pinetry. I did look at an Australian. I looked at John Eales. I looked at George Gregan. Yeah. I thought George Gregan was very close there. I just think the past 20-odd years, 25 years has been pretty well dominated by All Black South Africa rugby. And I feel like you need someone from South Africa on that list. Finding that individual was hard, but I think Victor Matfield, was what rugby is. He was a respectable player. He wasn't a Bucky's Botha-like player, and just knew the game and was one of the best to ever do it.
And look, a lot of the reasons you described there for Victor Matfield is why I've gone for John Eales, right? Well, it would be un-Australian for me not to have a Wallaby on this. But again, a 2-time World Cup winner, one of the greatest captains of Australian rugby. And I just look back at when Australian rugby was at its height and when rugby was at its height, right? I think arguably you could say the peak for rugby was the 2003 World Cup, right? It was huge here on Australian soil. Eales was captaining then. But Eales was the embodiment of the Wallabies, and he's such a great ambassador for the game. He did everything right. He's now gone into the business world and has shown that there's life outside of rugby. Players has taken his skills from the field to off the field, and it's just George Gregan. I also did consider there because he's just an iconic Australian player. Stephen Larkham I considered as well.
Certainly more lock
up there as well. Like quite a few Wallabies, but then I think who led all of them, who moulded them into a World Cup winning team, and that was John Eales. And I think because he is such a I've actually worked with him in his post rugby career only for brief events, but he's just a very quiet sort of guy. Doesn't make a big fuss about anything. Doesn't like a big fuss being made about him. And I think that he sort of fades in a lot of people's mind because of those reasons. But when you look at what he did on the field and what he did for Australian rugby, he was amazing.
I had like a couple of like sevens players in my head. You know, Rush was one that came to mind. Carl Tanana, Rupini Kalsambelbel as well from Fiji. You know, you have some of those guys, and you just go, man, there is a lot to look at. I know the English will be unhappy we probably didn't leave any Englishmen, but the only one I could put was, I think, Johnny.
Yeah.
And then I looked at it and I go, Johnny Wilkinson or Dan Carter?
Yeah. There's a lot of
and then
really
I go,
great.
yeah, like, if I'd probably pick Dan Carter over Johnny Wilkinson, so how am I putting Johnny Wilkinson on it? But then if I go Dan Carter, Victor Matfield, I could probably make an argument like that's apples and oranges we're starting to get into, but that's where, and again, the same with Dan Carter and John Eales. I'd probably put John Eales over Dan Carter, as with all the things that Dan Carter accomplished, and arguably the most important position, on a rugby field at first five. I'd still probably go John Eales over Dan Carter because I think that as talented as Carter was, the talent around Carter as well, there was a lot there.
Yep.
John Eales, you know, everyone, if you don't remember that goal kick in the Bledisloe to win the Bledisloe, like that is just peak John Eales.
Yeah,
that's all I can remember about John Eales is just what a freak athlete. So, yeah, I don't mind your list at all. I can sit there and go, I'm pretty happy because our arguments were the fact that we ended with two locks as well, like it just all like it was very similar.
Yeah, look, I saw your list and I just tried to think like, can I take any of these players out? Like, is there anyone, sort of what you were thinking, like, can I put anyone over these players? And it was only at Mountfield that I felt like, okay, I could put Eales over him. You know, I think Lomu, and as much as it pains me to say, Lomu and McCaw have to be in there. I don't think anyone would have a list that didn't include those two players. And then I think after them is wide open for debate. And that's not saying that they're the two best, but just for the magnitude of their achievements puts them up there.
I think it's like when you're talking about basketball, you go LeBron James and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Now, they may not, again, you can argue the two best, they probably are the two best players, but you can go those two just guaranteed on just about everyone's list. I think McCaw and Lomu would be similar, where especially when you're not talking about greatest rugby player, you're just saying the Mount Rushmore when you're thinking about that. Very good. That I think is us today.
Yeah.
A lot happening. I'm back training full time, looking at a shoot shield debut. Hopefully, might be playing the Waratahs on the 18th. So I'll let you decide if you can work out what team I'm playing for. But yeah,
I'm just hitting the gym, getting sexy for the ladies.
Yeah, fair enough.
No rugby in my future. I'm too old now. I'm tired.
Knees are gone.
Knees gone, and I don't want to break my ribs again.
Yeah.
So there's that
He's called it back into the commentary booth. You
exactly. Look, I'm exiting the field gracefully. I know when it's time to call it quits.
You never want to play past your prime, and you hit your heights, and you've accomplished all you could.
I'm like Barry Sanders in a way.
Yeah.
Barry Sanders, everyone said, he stepped away too early. He knew when it was time. He knew when the passion was done.
The good ones know when to go.
Yeah, and I think we retired at similar ages as well. He was early 30s, I'm early 30s. So, pretty much exactly the same.
Everyone, round of applause for Husey.
Thanks, guys. Look, I don't do it for me. I do it for the city of Detroit, you know. Go Lions, yeah.
Oh, God. Alrighty, thank you for joining us today. If you've stayed all the way to the end here, make sure you subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Check us out on all of everything else. Thank you. See ya.
Peace.